It is the morning of January 16th, 1991. Within the next 24 hours, coalition forces will undertake a precision aerial campaign against Iraqi forces in what will be known as Operation Desert Storm. Desert Storm will see almost 4,000 aircraft mobilized by both sides, with coalition forces taking part in over 100,000 sorties over the following month. Today, we take a look at some of the key events during the first strike, and with a little help from DCS, attempt to recreate some of them for you. During the morning of January 16th, 1991, final preparations are underway for a huge strike against Iraqi forces. A large coalition air force had been assembling in the Saudi peninsula over the previous few months, known as Operation Desert Shield. In the early hours of January 17th, they are to begin a precise bombing campaign against a variety of Iraqi targets, coordinated to the minute for maximum efficiency. The Iraqis are currently involved in military operations in neighboring Kuwait, as they have been since August 1990. To the Iraqis, Kuwait must be controlled. They have always held a claim on the land since the breakup of the Ottoman Empire, but in the 80s, this became a more serious issue. Kuwaiti oil production had reached very high levels, creating a market disparity with Iraqi production, thus threatening the Iraqi economy. To stabilize the increasingly fragile Iraqi economy, an invasion of Kuwait was the perceived panacea. The Western response was to condemn the action, and a UN deadline was set. If Iraq did not retreat from Kuwait by January 15, 1991, action would be taken. The time for action was now at hand. The opening strike would employ a variety of aircraft spanning multiple eras of military aviation. Leading the air campaign would be the latest in coalition air power at the time, F-117 stealth bombers, F-15Es, and new Tornadoes, to name a few. Older aircraft from all over the West would also take part: B-52s, F-4 Phantoms, F-111s, Buccaneers, and even Victor V bombers. This wide assortment of coalition aircraft was unlike any other air campaign. January 16th marks the final day after several weeks of mock operations. Each day for several weeks, coalition aircraft have taken off and been given orders to gather in various formations, flying circuits around particular areas in the northern parts of the Saudi peninsula. The goal of this initial phase was to accustom the Iraqis to the massive radar presence of aircraft in the sky, which could not be hidden, and would set off alarms everywhere. The idea was that if Iraqi early warning radars were being triggered every day, then it would make it harder to predict just when an attack would take place. Today, Wednesday the 16th, all the same flights are ordered to take off and form up. To Iraqi radar operators, it's just another day of massive yet benign air activity. This time, however, it will be far from benign. Over the Atlantic Ocean, 7 B-52s armed with AGM-86 cruise missiles are en route to their mission area over the eastern Mediterranean. They have made a long non-stop journey from Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. In a few hours, they will release their cruise missiles to designated coordinates, turn around, and fly back to their home base without stopping. A 35-hour round trip, it will be the longest bombing mission ever accomplished. Meanwhile, in the Persian Gulf, US warships prepare Tomahawk surface-to-surface missiles for similar strikes. These Tomahawks, along with the slower cruise missiles, are all timed to hit their targets simultaneously, announcing the beginning of the operation. As evening sets in, two other important elements are preparing. The first is a flight of 10 Nighthawk F-117s. They have the dangerous job of flying into Iraqi territory and circling over the capital, Baghdad, waiting for the strike. This will be the first test of the aircraft's stealth capability in combat. Baghdad, at the time, was arguably the most heavily defended city in the world, with heavy anti-air coverage. Once the initial missile strikes have occurred, the Nighthawks are to drop their weapons on specific targets over the city at 0300 hours, a key communications center in the middle of the city, and several command bunkers. The other crucial element are two army groups of Apache attack helicopters, 4 in each group, and each led by a Special Operations MH-53 Pavelo. Following the initial surprise attack, coalition aircraft will need to enter Iraq. 2 key radar emplacements have been set up by the Iraqis on the border to prevent this. The job of the Apaches is to fly low, using night vision and infrared to seek out these sites, and then destroy them using a variety of weapons, including Hellfire missiles. Once these sites are destroyed, a corridor will be opened for coalition aircraft to enter Iraqi airspace to continue the operation. With everything in place, the green light is given for operations to begin on H hour at exactly 0238 hours on January 17th. This will be arguably one of the most ambitious American military operations, with so many moving parts, all interdependent, and needing to engage at exactly the right time. This phase of the operation will be the most crucial, and if one element fails, it will cause multiple contingency issues. Nevertheless, everything has been meticulously planned, and confidence in synchronicity is high. It is now just after midnight. The clock ticks over to January 17th. Aircraft are already in the air as more begin to take off. Some are forming up behind refueling aircraft. Everyone waits for their next orders. The Iraqis likely don't suspect much, as the air activity mimics the previous few weeks of flights. However, further to the south out of Iraq view, other formations are also in the air, far more than the Iraqis had seen so far. AWACS aircraft have been airborne for some time and are currently underway directing the 2 groups of Apaches towards the radar emplacements in Iraq. Flying low, these 2 flights led by Pavelos head towards their designated targets. 2 Iraqi radar outposts. Meanwhile, the F-117s have reached Baghdad and begin circling the city. Despite the heavy SAM coverage, it seems the Iraqis are unaware they are overhead. With radio silence and no radar, the crews rely on the time as their only cue to begin the strike. The B-52s have reached position. With the green light, they release their 36 cruise missiles and turn to make the long flight back to America. These slow-moving cruise missiles will take several minutes to reach their destination and have been aimed at critical infrastructure, including power generators and comm sites. At the same time, the Navy launches its barrage of 116 Tomahawk missiles aimed at further comm sites, missile factories, and command centers in Baghdad. These are an assortment of explosive warheads and warheads filled with long strips of filaments designed to spread out over power transformers, causing electrical issues. The last to release their firepower is the Army, whose Apaches reach their targets slightly ahead of time. Because of the slightly premature arrival, they choose to hold back and hover some distance from the outposts. The Apaches, viewing the radar bases through their targeting systems, noticed the lights suddenly go out, followed by figures moving around outside. It is likely the Iraqis could see or hear the helicopters. Nevertheless, at 02:38 hours, the army are given the go-ahead to fire and unleash rockets, missiles and cannon fire onto the two bases, destroying all critical infrastructure and becoming the first shots of the war to hit their targets. 5 minutes after H hour, the bases are reported destroyed, and the first formations of jets are given the go-ahead to enter Iraq at 02:43. The first to enter would be a pair of F-111s, flying low with terrain following radars, leading 22 F-15Es against airfields in western Iraq. Meanwhile, a flight of 3 F-111s head towards Baghdad to give electronic aid to the F-117 crews if they need it. To keep stealth, the F-117s are under radio silence and have active radars off. There will be no way of confirming the outcome of their mission until they are back near Saudi Arabia. However, Western reporters are on the ground believing there will be an imminent attack. At the air control center, they watch a CNN broadcast from Baghdad, which they believe is routed through a targeted communication center. The CNN reporters say they hear aircraft overhead.
Still hit again, and we can hear jet planes flying overhead now.
At 0300, the F-117s drop their bombs, and the CNN report cuts out.
Now the sirens are sounding for the first time. The Iraqis have informed us.
Command cheers, knowing their mission is going as planned. AA fire blindly reaches into the night sky, and the F-117s turn home. Shortly thereafter, the barrage of Tomahawk missiles began to hit their targets around Baghdad, destroying further communication infrastructure, command centers, and switching stations. Meanwhile, the B-52 cruise missiles also began hitting infrastructure, including power stations and comms centers. Coalition aircraft by this time were streaming into Iraq, thought Saudi Arabia. Notably, fighters such as F-14s, F-15Cs and Tornadoes are tasked with combat air patrol near Iraqi bases, should any interceptors take off. The flight of F-15Es heading westward begin hitting ground targets, including Scud missile sites and SAM sites. Simultaneously, Navy FA-18s and A-6 intruders launched from carriers are heading towards the fight. With the Iraqis now on full alert, fights begin to break out. A pair of Mirage F-1s are picked up on radar, closing in on an EF-111. Using terrain following radar, the EF-111 crew managed to outmaneuver the Mirage, which hits the side of a mountain. The crew is credited with a maneuver kill. The second F-1 is picked up by an F-15C and shot down. Shortly after, yet another Mirage is picked up and shot down by an F-15, followed by a MiG-29, piloted by a veteran pilot of the Iraq-Iran War, with 3 kills to his name. Yet another engagement follows, with a further 2 MiG-29s being picked up on radar and shot down by F-15s, and 2 MiG-21s shot down by FA-18s on a strike mission. While action is occurring in the western areas of Iraq, much of the southwestern part of the country, leading to Baghdad, is still under heavy radar coverage. Search and track radars are set up everywhere, and suppression of enemy air defenses missions are necessary to clear them out. To do this, flights of F-4G Wild Weasels and FA-18s armed with anti-radiation missiles are sent in with an escort of F-15Cs. They will have the dangerous job of heading straight towards Baghdad and clearing out any perceived radar threats. However, unlike in Vietnam, these suppression missions will not actually require a Wild Weasel aircraft to act as bait. Instead, the Navy would launch 38 BQM-74C decoy drones, which would compel radar operators on the ground to switch on their search and track radars. The now visible radars would be hit by high-speed anti-radiation missiles, destroying over 30 ground installations in and around the Baghdad area. With strike missions still occurring against fixed positions, conventional bombing begins occurring in the southwest of Iraq against ground forces. B-52s move in, along with other bombers such as F-117s. As dawn approaches, coalition forces will experience their first combat loss. Two F-A-18s launched from Navy carriers head towards Baghdad. On radar, they see a pair of MiG-25s heading towards them. A beyond visual range engagement begins, with one of the MiGs firing a R-40RD, a dangerous Fox 1 missile designed to destroy supersonic bombers. The missile hits one of the F-A-18s, destroying the aircraft and killing its pilot. The sun begins to rise, and the next phase of the attack begins. A flight of 12 Tornado GR-1s are sent over the border into Iraq at a very low altitude. Armed with the JP-233 submunition dispenser, their job is to head towards Talil Air Base, fly over the runways, release munitions, and get out. The aim is to release the JP-233 payload, a mixture of anti-runway bomblets and anti-personnel mines which can lay dormant, as an area denial strategy to render the enemy runways inoperable. Heading in at 200 feet, they all release their weapons. However, they receive far heavier return fire than expected. Despite flying low to avoid radar lock, near the deck they are far easier targets for anti-aircraft guns and infrared missiles. At the same time, 4 more Tornadoes are preparing for a similar strike against another airbase, Al Rumaila, but this time with standard 1,000-pound bombs. They have been tasked with toss bombing these onto the base. This bombing strategy is generally dependent on a targeting system that provides a cue indicating optimal range, after which the pilot must pull into the pre-selected release angle before the weapons are released. One of the aircraft in formation is flown by John Peters and John Nickel. Coming under flak fire, the aircraft begins pulling into the climb to release the payload. However, Peters and Nickel's aircraft experiences a fault. There's an issue with the release cue. They keep climbing, now higher than they're supposed to be and still unable to get a release cue. They abort and pull back down. However, they are hit by a portable surface-to-air missile which easily locks them up at this height. Peters and Nichols eject, but are quickly captured by the Iraqis. With the sun now up, the situation on the ground becomes visible. U-2 spy planes are sent up to monitor the situation, with a particular emphasis on searching for Scud missile positions. Coalition forces were well aware that Saddam Hussein's first response would be to fire Scuds not at coalition forces, but at Israel, whom he viewed as the primary enemy. While initial plans included far more resources to use against airfields and other aircraft, these resources were retasked after little activity from the Iraqi Air Force. Later in the day, French Jaguars are sent into Kuwait to hit Scud missile facilities. These older aircraft were still good for the job, however several reported damage from ground fire. A-10 Warthogs also saw heavy action, attacking a variety of targets further north, including radar positions and Scud sites. This opened up further corridors of safety for coalition aircraft coming in from Turkish airspace in the northwest. As evening sets in, tasking continues non-stop. From older aircraft such as A-6 Intruders hitting bases to F-15Es, there is continual air domination. During the opening day of Desert Storm, non-stop missions were flown. In fact, over 2,000 sorties were reported to have been flown during the first 24 hours, and this same intensity will continue for almost every day for the 5-week-long air war. The Iraqi Air Force would lose 8 aircraft during the opening day, whilst coalition forces would lose roughly 19. After the 17th, the Gulf War air campaign would continue until February 23rd. The massive coalition air force was simply too large for the Iraqi Air Force to launch a counter-offensive. Despite being one of the largest air forces in the world, the Iraqi Air Force decides against going out in full force, leaving the majority of their aircraft on the ground. They would attempt several retaliatory strikes in the following weeks, but these would meet heavy resistance and were smaller in scope. This led the Iraqis to start a mass exodus of their aircraft to Iran, who they had previously been at war with, in the hope that one day they would get their air force back. During this period, coalition forces attempted to create a wall of fighters along the Iran-Iraq border to prevent this exodus. The Iraqis would launch Operation Samura in an attempt to break through. In one instance, 2 MiG-25s jumped a 4-ship formation of F-15Cs, leading to a dogfight. All aircraft would break off from the fight, with the 2 MiGs returning unscathed, whilst one F-15 returned to base with damage, but no losses. Samura would mark the last Iraqi Air Force operation of the war, after which the Iraqis decided to ground their aircraft in the hope of preserving these costly assets, rather than losing them in the conflict. Thus, the war in the air was largely over, while the rest of the campaign would focus on coalition air forces striking ground targets. This would culminate in the coalition ground invasion to liberate Kuwait on February 24th, while the US Air Force, Navy, and Army would see much success in the initial phase of the war. The US Marines, supported by USMC aviation Harriers, Cobras, Hornets, would also have their time to shine, particularly during the often overlooked Battle of Kuwait International Airport, in which the 1st Marine Division, outfitted with older M60 tanks and Cobra gunships, managed to rapidly smash through Iraqi defenses into the city, leading the way far ahead of the more modern Army M1 Abrams groups. All in all, as we have seen, these first strikes of Desert Storm exemplify the exceptional planning and technological ability of the US military and coalition forces at the time. While you could put it all down to numerical advantage, on closer inspection, each element during the first strike could have been isolated and repelled, and given the contingency, this could have meant disaster. Yet working in lockstep and guided by precise planning, these forces were able to successfully undertake a complex sequence of events, resulting in overwhelming air superiority.